I am Camila Ríos, and at 26 years old, Buenos Aires felt like both a promise and a challenge. I had arrived in this metropolis with the hope of forging my own path, far from the small town where I grew up. My passion for digital architectural visualization was my compass. I secured a position as a junior designer at Creative Horizon, a renowned studio in the heart of Palermo. It was my first big opportunity at such a prestigious company, and my nerves were on edge. The studio was modern, full of light, and had an atmosphere that promised inspiration. From the very first day, I noticed the curious glances. My dark skin, curly hair, and adoption story were apparently topics of conversation. I tried hard to ignore the whispers, focusing solely on my work and tasks. I wanted my talent to speak for me, not my appearance or my past. I had spent years perfecting my skills, dedicating nights and early mornings to every detail. I was determined to prove my worth. My goal was simple: to deliver impeccable results and exceed all expectations. I knew the path wouldn't be easy, but my spirit was always resilient. I was always taught to fight for what I believe in. The city's energy propelled me, and each day at the studio was a new lesson. I observed my colleagues, learning their methods and adapting to the fast pace. I wanted to absorb all possible knowledge. I felt like a sponge, soaking in every detail of the environment. From how architects conceptualized to how designers executed, it was a new and fascinating world. Despite the initial discomfort, the excitement of being there was palpable. I was in the place where my dreams could begin to take shape. My heart raced with every new project. My adoptive parents always supported me unconditionally. They taught me the value of hard work and the importance of integrity. Their lessons constantly resonated in my mind. They reminded me that my worth wasn't in how others saw me, but in who I was. Those words were an anchor in moments of doubt. They gave me strength to keep going. The office came alive each morning with the sound of keyboards and lively conversations. I immersed myself in my tasks, trying to go unnoticed. I wanted to be just one of them, but the feeling of being different persisted, a subtle shadow in the back of my mind. I tried not to give it importance, but it was a weight I always carried. It was hard to completely ignore. Still, my optimism was unshakable. I believed in my ability and the power of my work. I knew that, in time, I would prove what I was capable of. I was ready for the challenge. This new chapter in Buenos Aires was an opportunity to redefine who I was. Not the adopted black girl, but Camila, the designer. My identity was in my hands. I was ready to face any obstacle that came my way. My determination was my greatest strength, and my talent, my secret weapon. I knew I could overcome anything. The first few weeks at Creative Horizon were a mix of euphoria and anxiety. I loved the work, but social interactions were a minefield. I felt like I was always under observation. The comments started subtly, almost imperceptibly. "How exotic your hair is," or "We've never had anyone like you here." They were phrases said with a smile, but they made me feel out of place. One day, I overheard two colleagues whispering in the kitchen. "It's the new girl, the adopted one," one said. "Yes, the black one," the other replied, with a tone that chilled me. My heart sank. It was the first time I heard those words so directly, and they hurt more than I wanted to admit. I felt exposed, reduced to a label. It wasn't my name, it was my origin. I tried to stay calm, to continue with my coffee as if I hadn't heard anything. But the pang of pain and shame settled in my chest. It was a horrible feeling. From that moment on, the phrase, "the adopted black girl," became an echo in my mind. I heard it in every glance, in every uncomfortable silence. It haunted me throughout the company. I realized it wasn't just a matter of appearance, but of my history. Being adopted, and also racially different, put me in a separate category for them. It was an invisible barrier. My teammates, mostly white and upper middle class, seemed to have an insatiable curiosity about my personal life. Their questions were invasive, though disguised as interest. "Where are you really from?" a colleague asked me one day, ignoring my answer about my hometown. It implied that my biological origin was all that mattered. It was very frustrating. I felt like I had to work twice as hard to be taken seriously. My ideas were often dismissed or attributed to others. It was as if my voice didn't carry the same weight. Despite everything, I clung to my work. My designs, my renders, were my refuge. There, my talent was the only language that mattered. It was my way of resisting. I spent extra hours perfecting every detail, hoping that the quality of my work would silence the prejudices. I wanted my skills to be undeniable. It was my only hope, but the atmosphere became heavy. The inside jokes, the condescending glances, all contributed to a feeling of isolation. I felt increasingly alone. I started to doubt myself, whether I truly fit into that environment. The confidence I had brought to Buenos Aires began to crack. It was a very hard blow. However, deep down, I knew I couldn't give up. My dream was bigger than their prejudices. I had to keep fighting for my place. The atmosphere at Creative Horizon became increasingly oppressive. The phrase, the adopted black girl, was a ghost that followed me, whispered in the hallways and in conversations. I felt constantly judged. I tried to ignore it, but the weight of the glances and veiled comments was overwhelming. I took refuge at my desk, with headphones on, trying to block out the external noise. I just wanted to work. My ideas in meetings were often interrupted or, worse, completely ignored. Then, someone else would present them as their own and receive praise. It was frustrating and demoralizing. I felt my voice had no weight, that my contributions were invisible. It was as if my presence was tolerated, but my intellect and creativity were not. This made me very sad. The loneliness in the office was palpable. My colleagues gathered for lunch or coffee, and I was rarely invited. I felt like an outsider, observing from the periphery. I started bringing my lunch to avoid the cafeteria and spent my breaks in the nearby park. I needed that respite from the toxic environment, a moment to breathe. It was my only refuge. Sometimes I wondered if I was overreacting, if it was my own insecurity. But then, a subtle comment or a look of contempt reminded me of the reality. It wasn't my imagination. Frustration built up inside me. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, but I didn't know how. I feared that any confrontation would make things worse. I preferred silence. My renders and visualizations remained impeccable. My work was of high quality. But it seemed no one noticed, or they didn't want to acknowledge it. It was as if nothing mattered. I felt trapped in a gilded cage. The studio was prestigious, but the emotional cost was enormous. I was losing my joy, my spark. It was a very high price. I spent nights reviewing my skills, learning new software, looking for online courses. I wanted to be so indispensable that they couldn't ignore me. It was my only hope. I thought about quitting many times, about finding another place where my talent would be valued. But the idea of running away seemed like a defeat. I didn't want to give up so easily. I wanted to prove them wrong, that I wasn't just the adopted black girl. I was a capable professional with much to offer. My worth was not defined by them. The silence of my superiors regarding my colleagues' behavior was deafening. It seemed they approved of it, or at least allowed it. It was a silent complicity, but deep within me, a small flame of resistance burned. I wouldn't let them extinguish me. My talent was my light, and it would shine. I wasn't going to let them win. The monotony of veiled discrimination broke when a new project arrived at the studio. It was a large-scale commission, the visualization of a luxury residential complex in Puerto Madero. Everyone in the studio was excited. It was an opportunity to shine. I, as usual, expected to be assigned secondary tasks like lighting or minor textures. To my surprise, the project director, Mr. Morales, asked me to take charge of the vegetation and landscaping. It was a crucial component, but not the most glamorous. I accepted professionally. Although it wasn't the main role, I saw an opportunity. Landscaping was my favorite area, where I could infuse life and emotion. I could make the designs breathe. It was my chance to shine. I immersed myself in the work with renewed intensity. I researched native species, growth patterns, and how sunlight would interact with each leaf. I wanted it to be perfect. My colleagues scoffed, calling me the gardener. Too much detail for some plants, Camila, one would say. No one will notice that, another would add. Their comments discouraged me, but I kept going, ignoring their words. I knew the difference was in the details, in the authenticity. I wanted every tree and shrub to tell a story. I spent nights in the studio, refining every shadow, every reflection in the pond water. The screen became my canvas, and the project my passion. I was totally immersed. The day of the preliminary presentation arrived. The meeting room was filled with executives and the main client, an elegant woman with a serious demeanor, the renowned architect Isabel Vargas. As the team presented the models and general renders, I felt a mix of nerves and pride. My part would come at the end, as a compliment. It was my moment. When it was my turn, my voice trembled at first, but then gained strength. I explained my choices, the logic behind each plant, the atmosphere I wanted to create. I spoke with passion. I showed the renders of my section, and a silence fell over the room. It wasn't a silence of disapproval, but of awe. The images were vibrant, full of life. Ms. Vargas, who until then had maintained an unreadable expression, leaned forward, her eyes fixed on my work with an intensity that surprised me. "The landscaping is exceptional," she said with a clear, resonant voice. "I have never seen such organic and detailed integration. Who is responsible for this?" Her gaze was on me. My heart skipped a beat. Mr. Morales pointed to me, and Ms. Vargas nodded. For the first time, I felt my talent was seen, not my skin color or my history. It was a ray of hope. Architect Isabel Vargas's words resonated in my ears long after the meeting ended. "The landscaping is exceptional. Who is responsible for this?" It was the first time someone outside the studio acknowledged my work with such vehemence. My colleagues looked at me with a mix of surprise and resentment. Mr. Morales, for his part, seemed uncomfortable, but he couldn't deny the praise. The tension in the air was palpable. The next day, I received an unexpected email. It was from Ms. Vargas, requesting a private meeting with me to discuss additional landscaping details. My heart raced. I went to the meeting with a mix of excitement and caution. Did she want changes? Or was it a trap? I prepared for any eventuality, bringing my sketches and notes. Ms. Vargas received me in her elegant downtown office. Her gaze was penetrating, but there was a warmth in her eyes that reassured me. She invited me to sit. "Camila," she began, "your work on the Puerto Madero project is more than just landscaping. It's art. You've captured the essence of life, not just of plants." Her words moved me. She explained that her vision for the complex was to create an urban oasis, and my designs had exceeded her expectations. I had captured the atmosphere she envisioned. It was incredible. Then, to my surprise, she asked me about my creative process, my inspirations, my training. She didn't ask about my origin or my adoption, only about my art. It was a relief. "Why weren't you assigned a more central part of the project?" she asked directly. I was speechless, not knowing what to answer. I couldn't complain about my colleagues. I stammered something about the team structure, trying to be diplomatic. She looked at me with understanding, as if reading between the lines. Her silence was eloquent. "I understand," she said with a slight smile, "but I need you to handle all exterior visualizations from now on. I want your personal touch in every detail." It was a great responsibility. I felt overwhelmed by the trust she placed in me. It was an opportunity one never would have imagined. My talent was being recognized by such an important figure. My colleagues quickly learned of Ms. Vargas's decision. Their resentful glances intensified, and the whispers became more frequent. The envy was evident, but this time, their comments didn't affect me in the same way. I had the client's backing, and that gave me immense strength. I was no longer invisible. Ms. Vargas's recognition was a balm for my soul. It gave me the validation I so longed for, the confirmation that my work mattered. It was a turning point. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly part of something, not because of my history, but because of my skill. My talent had spoken, and someone had listened. Ms. Vargas's endorsement transformed my dynamic at Creative Horizon. Although my colleagues' hostility persisted, I now had a shield, the client's direct demand. They could no longer ignore me. Mr. Morales, though visibly uncomfortable, had to comply with the instructions. He assigned me more responsibilities on the Puerto Madero project, all related to exteriors and landscaping. Ms. Vargas and I began to have weekly meetings, often just the two of us. She challenged me, pushed me to go further, but always with genuine respect for my ideas. I felt free to experiment, to propose innovative solutions. Her trust in me was a catalyst for my creativity. It was a very different work environment. Every render I delivered was proof of my growth. My visualizations were increasingly detailed, more emotional, capturing the essence of the spaces. I was honing my skills. My colleagues tried to subtly sabotage me, hiding files or giving incorrect information. But I was alert and always had backups of my work. I was prepared. Ms. Vargas noticed the tension. One day, during a meeting, she asked me directly, "Is there any problem with internal collaboration, Camila? Your team seems distant." I responded diplomatically, but she read between the lines. "Talent must be nurtured, not stifled," she commented, with a meaningful glance at Mr. Morales. Her support was evident. Her intervention was a clear message to everyone. My position on the project was secured, and my work was valued by the most important person, the client. It was a victory. I began to feel a confidence I hadn't experienced since arriving in Buenos Aires. My voice became firmer in meetings, my ideas bolder. I was empowering myself. I no longer hid behind my headphones. I walked through the office with my head held high, focused on my work and on Ms. Vargas's satisfaction. My posture changed. The phrase, "the adopted black girl," remained a murmur, but now it sounded hollow, powerless. Its meaning faded in the face of real recognition. It no longer affected me. I began to see my adoption and my origin not as a weakness, but as part of my unique story. They had given me a different perspective, a special sensibility. It was my strength. Ms. Vargas was not just a client, but she was becoming a mentor. Her advice on business and creativity was invaluable. I learned a lot from her. This new chapter in my professional life was transforming me. I was flourishing, not despite my challenges, but because of them. I was becoming a new person. Camila's success with Ms. Vargas did not go unnoticed, and the envy at Creative Horizon grew denser. The whispers about the adopted black girl transformed into more direct and malicious comments. One day, while working at my desk, I heard a colleague say aloud, "Some people have luck, not talent. They just need a little pity to get ahead." The insinuation was clear. I slowly turned, looking him in the eyes. "My luck is the result of years of hard work and dedication," I replied calmly, but with a firmness that surprised him. "And my talent from my own hand." He mumbled a weak apology, but the atmosphere had become tense. The confrontation, though subtle, had made it clear that I would no longer stay silent. I was no longer the same. Another incident occurred during a team lunch to which, surprisingly, I was invited. A colleague asked, "Isn't it curious how Ms. Vargas became so interested in Camila, being she's so different?" She paused significantly, waiting for a reaction. I took a deep breath. "My difference is my strength," I said, looking her directly. "It allows me to see the world differently, and that is reflected in my work." The conversation abruptly ended, and the silence became awkward. I had set a boundary, and they felt it. They could no longer use my characteristics against me. Mr. Morales, who had witnessed both exchanges, seemed increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. The studio's reputation was at stake if the environment became too toxic. Ms. Vargas, for her part, became more protective. In a meeting, she publicly praised my work ethic and professionalism, making it clear that she would not tolerate any interference. "Camila's talent is an asset to this project and to this studio," she stated, with an authority that left no room for doubt. "Any attempt to undermine it will be considered sabotage." Her words were a direct blow to my detractors. The balance of power had shifted. I was no longer the silent victim, but a backed professional. It was a game changer. Despite the growing tension, I felt stronger than ever. Every attack made me more resilient. Every challenge pushed me to improve. I was growing with adversity. I understood that their hostility was not personal, but a reflection of their own insecurities and prejudices. My success confronted them with their own limitations. It was a mirror for them. I spent more time with Ms. Vargas, learning not only about architecture, but about leadership and how to navigate a competitive world. She was a source of inspiration. I realized that the real battle was not against them, but against my own doubts. And with every small victory, those doubts dissipated. I was conquering myself. My talent was not only being recognized, but it was opening doors and closing mouths. It was my way of demonstrating my worth without needing to shout. It was my answer. Despite Ms. Vargas's clear warning, the malice at Creative Horizon did not diminish. Instead, it became more insidious. My colleagues, unable to attack me directly, resorted to dirtier tactics. They began spreading rumors about me, insinuating that my relationship with Ms. Vargas was inappropriate or that I had used contacts to get my position. They were cruel, baseless lies. I heard one of them say that I was Ms. Vargas's protégé and that my talent was a sham. Envy had transformed into a poison running through the studio. One day, while I was working at my desk, my computer mysteriously crashed and several important files from my project with Ms. Vargas disappeared. Thanks to my backups, I was able to recover them, but the intention was clear. I felt violated. My workspace, my sanctuary, had been desecrated. The feeling of insecurity returned, but this time, accompanied by a cold fury. This was too much. I decided not to confront them directly, but to document every incident. I took screenshots, noted dates and times, and saved suspicious emails. I needed proof. Ms. Vargas noticed my tension. "Camila, is everything all right at the studio?" she asked with concern. "You seem more stressed than usual." Her empathy touched me. I told her about the rumors and the computer incident, omitting the more personal details. She listened attentively, her expression hardening with each word. "This is unacceptable," she said firmly. "Talent should not be punished with malice. I will do something about it." Her determination gave me a reprieve. The next day, Ms. Vargas had a closed-door meeting with Mr. Morales and the studio's management. The tension in the office was palpable. Everyone knew something big was happening. After the meeting, Mr. Morales called me into his office. His face was pale, and his voice unusually soft. "Camila, I apologize for what has been happening," he said. He informed me that disciplinary measures would be taken and that my safety and well-being were a priority. It was a victory, but the taste was bittersweet. There was still a long way to go. Although the situation in the office temporarily improved, the atmosphere of distrust persisted. I knew the battle wasn't over. It had only changed form. It was a truce. But my relationship with Ms. Vargas strengthened even further. She became my unconditional ally, my defender in a world that sometimes seemed hostile. She was my rock. This period taught me the importance of resilience and the need to protect myself, not only with my talent, but with my intelligence and my preparedness. I was learning a lot. Ms. Vargas's intervention brought a tense calm to the studio. My colleagues became more cautious, but the hostility remained latent. I, for my part, focused on my work and my mentor. Our meetings with Ms. Vargas became more personal. We talked about art, life, and the challenges of being a woman in a male-dominated field. She understood me. One day, while reviewing some sketches, Ms. Vargas paused at a detail. It was a small symbol I had unconsciously drawn, a stylized flower that my adoptive mother used to draw. "This symbol," she said, her voice soft, almost a whisper. "Is it a jacaranda flower?" I nodded, surprised. It was a common flower in Buenos Aires, but my mother drew it in a particular way. "My adoptive parents had a giant jacaranda in our backyard," I explained. "My mother used to draw it, and I sometimes incorporate it into my designs. It's a small tribute." Ms. Vargas looked at me with an unreadable expression, a mix of surprise and melancholy. "I knew your adoptive parents, Camila," she said, and my world stopped. "They were great friends of mine." My mind tried to process her words. How was it possible? The renowned architect Isabel Vargas knew my parents, who lived such a simple life. It was unbelievable. "Your mother, Elena, was a wonderful woman," she continued, with a sad smile. "She always talked about you, about your talent for drawing, about how you saw the world in a unique way." Tears filled my eyes. My parents had never mentioned this connection. Why the secret? Why had she never said it before? It was a shocking revelation. "She always said you had a special gift," she added, her voice filled with emotion. "And that one day, that gift would take you far. That's why, when I saw your work, I knew it was you." She explained that she had been discreetly following my trajectory since she learned I worked in the same field. She had sought out my work, my name. She looked for me. "When I heard how they called you at the studio, the adopted black girl, it deeply hurt me," she confessed. "I knew I had to intervene. Your parents would have wanted someone to protect you." The revelation left me breathless. It wasn't a coincidence that she had recognized me. It wasn't just my talent, but a deep connection to my past, to my adoptive roots. Suddenly, everything made sense. Her unconditional support, her defense, her interest in my well-being. She wasn't just a client. She was a guardian angel sent by my parents. It was a magical moment. I felt a wave of gratitude and a deep sadness for not having known sooner. But also immense strength. I was not alone. I had unexpected support. Ms. Vargas's revelation left me in a state of shock and awe. The woman who had defended my talent and dignity was not a stranger, but a friend of my adoptive parents. My world was redefined. My parents, I managed to say, my voice breaking. Why did they never tell me? She explained that my parents were very humble and discreet people. They wanted you to build your own path, Camila, Ms. Vargas said. They didn't want their connection to people like me to influence your career. They wanted your success to be solely your own. I understood their nobility, but I also felt the weight of their silence. I had fought alone, believing I had no connections, when in reality, an invisible bond connected me to someone so influential. Ms. Vargas looked at me with compassion. But now the situation is different. Your talent has spoken for itself, and it's time for you to know that you have allies. Her gaze was firm. We decided it was time to reveal the truth to the management of Creative Horizon. Not as an act of revenge, but as a way to establish a new standard. It was necessary. Ms. Vargas requested an urgent meeting with Mr. Morales and the studio partners. The atmosphere in the room was tense, and I felt nervous, but also empowered. She began by explaining her relationship with my adoptive parents, the admiration she felt for them and for me. Then, without mincing words, she addressed the discrimination I had faced. I am deeply concerned about the environment in this studio, she said in a clear voice. Camila has been subjected to racist and prejudiced comments just for being the adopted black girl. She mentioned the rumors, the sabotage on my computer, and the lack of support from management. Mr. Morales and the partners looked pale, not knowing where to put themselves. They were in shock. Talent has no color, no origin, no last name, Ms. Vargas continued. And if this studio cannot guarantee an environment of respect and equity, then my company cannot continue to be a client. The ultimatum was clear and forceful. The threat of losing their most important client hit them like lightning. Their faces reflected fear and shame. It was a hard blow. The partners promised a thorough investigation and drastic measures. They offered me apologies, which sounded hollow, but which I accepted with dignity. Justice was being served. I walked out of that meeting with a sense of liberation. The truth had been exposed, and Ms. Vargas's power had been my shield. I was free. News of the meeting spread like wildfire through the studio. My colleagues looked at me with a mix of fear and respect. The dynamic had changed forever. Ms. Vargas's revelation and ultimatum radically changed the atmosphere at Creative Horizon. Colleagues who once belittled me now treated me with false cordiality or avoided me altogether. The studio implemented new diversity and inclusion policies, and formal apologies were offered to all employees for the toxic environment. It was a superficial change, but a necessary one. Mr. Morales, under pressure from management, became more attentive and respectful. My ideas were heard and valued in meetings. My voice finally carried weight. But the truth is, my heart was no longer there. Ms. Vargas had opened my eyes to a world where my talent was truly celebrated without prejudice. She offered me a leadership position at her own architectural firm, with complete creative freedom, and a team that would value my unique perspective. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. I didn't hesitate to accept. It was time to leave behind the place where they had called me, the adopted black girl, and build my own horizon. It was my time to fly. My farewell from Creative Horizon was bittersweet. I was leaving a painful chapter, but I was taking invaluable lessons and the confirmation of my resilience. I was stronger than ever. News of my departure and my new role at Ms. Vargas's firm spread quickly. My former colleagues looked at me with envy, but I only felt peace. In my new position, I flourished. Ms. Vargas was not only my boss, but my mentor and my friend. Together, we created innovative projects that challenged the limits of visualization. My talent was recognized and celebrated. There were no whispers, no prejudices, just a team that valued diversity and creativity. It was the environment I had always dreamed of. In time, The story of how a client recognized my talent and rescued me from a toxic environment became known in the industry. I became an example of overcoming adversity. I accepted invitations to speak at conferences on diversity and design, sharing my story and advocating for inclusion. My voice became a tool for change. My relationship with Ms. Vargas deepened. She told me more stories about my adoptive parents, filling the gaps in my past and giving me a stronger connection to my roots. I understood that the label "the adopted Black girl" did not define me. It was just a part of my journey, a test I had overcome with dignity and talent. I was much more. My new horizon was not just professional, but personal. I had found my place, my voice, and the confirmation that my worth was unshakable. I was complete. Today, years later, I look back and see the path I have traveled. My name, Camila Ríos, resonates in the industry, not because of my adoption story or my skin color, but because of my talent and my vision. My firm, Ríos Visuals, founded with the support of Ms. Vargas, is a benchmark in the field of architectural visualization. We have created a diverse team where respect and creativity are pillars. Ms. Vargas, my mentor and friend, remains a key figure in my life. Her faith in me was the catalyst that allowed me to fly. I owe her so much, much more than a position. I often speak at universities and forums, sharing my story. My message is clear. Talent has no barriers, and resilience is our greatest strength. I inspire many young people. I remember the first time I heard "the adopted Black girl" at Creative Horizon. Those words, which once hurt me, are now a reminder of how far I've come. There is no resentment, only gratitude. That experience forced me to find my own voice, to trust my intuition, and to fight for my place. It made me stronger. My adoptive parents, though no longer with us, live in every success, in every project I undertake. Their love and teachings were the foundations of my strength. I have learned that true validation does not come from others, but from oneself. My worth does not depend on external approval, but on my own conviction. The turmoil at Creative Horizon was a turning point, but the real victory was internal. It was the ability to transform pain into purpose, prejudice into power. My story is a testament that recognition can come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes a client can see beyond labels. Art, design, creativity are my languages, and through them, I continue to break down barriers, build bridges, and demonstrate that talent is universal. Buenos Aires, the city that once challenged me, is now my home, my canvas. Every street, every building, every corner reminds me of my journey and my growth. And to all who have ever felt underestimated or invisible, I say, your worth is not defined by the perception of others. Your talent is your truth. Keep shining, keep creating, keep fighting. Because in the end, the light of your own truth will always prevail over any shadow. My legacy is not just professional success, but the hope I can offer to others. The adopted Black girl became a voice, an inspiration.